Given the fact that we're seeing a lot of tense changes or reshiftings in the world, either economic or political, how is that changing the outlook for investors such as Gateway Partners at the moment?
The future is bright. The road may be bumpy, and you may have some episodes of turbulence in between. So fasten your seatbelts. It's not going to be a straight line. But if I were to just take a 5-10-year outlook for emerging markets as a whole, of which clearly Southeast Asia, India are a part of, it's still very good, positive. Why? Because there's a young growing population that's urbanizing. There's a growing middle class that's consuming. So we still believe that these markets are very good for investing into companies that produce core goods, core services that's going to be consumed by this vast, growing, urbanizing middle class.
Right, but if the waters are going to be choppy in the near term, is that going to change the course of direction for the ship, just to make sure that you can smoothen out some of the bumps if it's going to be bumpier, choppier, at least for the next year or two?
You're referring to the tariffs particularly,
yeah, but, well, yes.
and a potential trade war. Right. Look, President Trump has telegraphed what he is going to do for a long time. So none of this should come as a surprise. So countries should be prepared for this turbulence. His basic line of attack is quite logical if you look at it from an American viewpoint. Why should all my manufacturing jobs be outside? Why can't I bring some of them back? But if you look at America's imports, it's roughly around $5 trillion. They export about $4 trillion. It's goods and services. Not all the $5 trillion is going to be brought back. So he's going to be sensible about it. I think it is going to be a bilateral, transactional discussion country by country. Clearly, China is going to be in that eye of the storm as a big exporter to U.S. And if you look at the composition of U.S. imports, 5 countries probably, or regions, contribute about 2/3 of the imports, them being Mexico, Canada, China, EU, and a few others. So he will do a bilateral discussion. Now, there is an opportunity here as well, because if you just look at Apple iPhones, less than 1% was produced in India 3 years ago. Last year is probably close to 10%. So maybe there is a bilateral trade to be done between India and US, maybe at the expense of some other country.
Right. Speaking of Southeast Asia and in the emerging market space, the other thing that people were hopeful for in this particular sector is easing interest rates and the Fed cutting rates, making it easier for investors such as yourself, I would assume, to actually pursue these investments. But now there's new volatility in the interest rate environment. How does that factor, or perhaps factor into your investment decisions or any changes on the outlook for Gateway Partners or investors in the emerging market space, given all that rate volatility that we're expecting?
We've always believed that interest rates are going to remain elevated. Why do we believe that? Number one, deglobalization means that cost of goods are going to go up. Number two, decarbonization also in the short run is going to be inflationary. In the long run, maybe it's the right thing to do. Also, demographics, and particularly the Western world, will support inflation. Also, the global debt levels are pretty high. They're about 350% of GDP. Last but not the least, under Trump, probably the euphoria is back and there'll be more investment, and actually there'll be growth, which will also drive inflation. So I don't see actually interest rates coming down. If anything, the last 10 years was the abnormal. We were abnormally low. We are actually going to be back to the normal. It's not even a new normal. It is the normal. So we should expect interest rates to remain elevated. I don't think the world is going to collapse if the interest rates, 5-year treasuries that are 5%. I don't think it is going to collapse. So yes, I mean, we need to factor that into the decision making, but it doesn't change the fundamentals.
Right, and just very quickly here, Mr. Shankar, when you look ahead to the year ahead, what sector or country in Southeast Asia or in the emerging market space that you're invested in are you most excited in, and why?